congregationals. Enjoyed the Story family getting up here and singing. And that's cruel to put a wood platform up here with boys with boots. They're going to be like, boy, I like the sound of this. I was expecting some percussion to start halfway through that song. And just banging around on that. That was good. I enjoyed it. I like those little fake microphones as well. You know, we've got some folks in our church. We might need to put some fake microphones in their hands. So they don't have to be kids, but, you know, that's a blessing. Boy, I loved it. Brother Pierce, I hope they're not. I hope our folks are not watching this live stream tonight. So, just a blessing, Brother Pierce. Good to see you and Brother Story both. I've known both of these men for a long time, and grateful for their testimonies. These are good missionaries right here. I'm telling you, I know God's going to use both of these families where they're going. It's an honor to be here. If you turn to Matthew chapter 9, we're going to be there in just a moment. I'm thankful that I get to be used in any way. Coming to Berean Baptist Church it's a special, this is a good church. I'm telling you, God has used Berean Baptist Church, and you may not know it because you're close to it, but your reputation is of a strong, missions-hearted church. And I'm thankful for the impact that Berean Baptist has had, church planting and missions. Thankful for your pastor continuing that and just building on that. This reputation of a church like this makes it very special for me to be able to be here. And we come in, and I've already heard it said, missions is the heartbeat of the church. The Great Commission is at the core of who we are. As independent Baptists in a local New Testament church, we are here to fulfill the Great Commission, and we are here. It's a privilege to be a part of that. I'm excited again to be here, but I come this week not having anything new. And I was actually talking to one of the ladies back here, and she said, we're just normal, down-home folks. She said, we don't need nothing sophisticated. And I said, well, it's a good thing you asked me to come preach this week, because my wife will tell you, there's really nothing new. It might seem basic, but sometimes we need to get back to the basics. And here's why, because I know that Berean Baptist Church has been in existence for a long time. I know many of you have been at Berean Baptist Church for a long time, which means you've been giving to missions for a long time. And one thing that I know as a pastor and as a longtime Christian myself is the longer you do anything, the more inclined you are to turn autopilot on and just do it because you've always done it and it's easy. I'm not accusing you, but I know my tendencies and I know human nature. And tonight I want to look at something that is at the core. It is a basic truth that is something all of us need in Matthew chapter 9. And if you've got it, if you wouldn't mind standing, Matthew chapter 9, we'll read God's Word. This is standing out of respect for it. And I want to read probably the four most predictable verses for a missions conference message. And yet, once again, it gets us back to the root of missions. Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 says, and Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Then saith he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. The question I'd like to pose to you tonight is a very basic question. And how long has it been since you were moved? I mean, I look back on my life sometimes and I think, has it been that long? And I don't want to go too long without being moved. For the people, the sheep that need to hear the gospel. Quick, just a very simple question. Has it been that long? Father, help us. And God, you know this message is burning in my heart. I want to convey it because I know who I am. I know how easy it is for me to get so busy that I am no longer moved. God, help us to not be people that do what we do because we're supposed to, but do what we do because we love you and we love people. Lord, move us tonight. Help us. As Brother Story mentioned, mine eye have affected my heart. I pray that you'd help us all with eyes of faith to see our hearts moved once again. We love you. We need you. Pray that you bless us in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. A few months back, I preached at a missions conference of a pastor friend of mine in Kansas, and his name is Tad LaGrosse. Some of you may know him, and he's up in Leavenworth, Kansas, and we started as freshmen in Bible college together. Our doors were a couple of doors away from each other, and we're very, very different people than we were at 18 years old, I'll say that. But the time that I got to spend with Brother LaGrosse was the most concentrated time that we've had since Bible college. And we're talking 28, 29, 30 years at this point almost that we were a freshman in college. And we spent a lot of time reminiscing. We spent a lot of time telling stories and laughing and just looking back. And it was a blessing to catch up and hang out. But one thing that kept coming up was we couldn't believe how long it had been. You know, at one point, we were doing the math, and the question, I don't know who asked it, but the question was, has it been that long? Is it possible that it's been that long as we talk? That question came up over and over because I'm now at the phase of life that I'm asking that. Has it been that long? It can't be. But then you count your fingers and you count your toes, and you realize it has been that long. See, that's life. It moves much faster the older that you get. You blink and you ask, has it really been 5 years since I've seen them? Has it actually been 3 years since we went on that trip? Has it actually been that long since I used the treadmill? You know the answer to that. So, you know, sometimes I say a couple of weeks ago, and my wife was like, that was last fall. You know, and there are some things that I'm okay with not having done in a while. I'm okay with not getting a speeding ticket for a while. And I'm okay with not getting sick. I'm okay with not moving for a while. I'm okay with a lot of things, but for certain things, you have to be careful of it. There are some things you ought not let go too long. Has it really been that long since I went to the doctor? Has it been that long since I went to get this checked out? And wait, when's the last time I changed the oil in my car? I mean, these are questions you better ask. But I'm asking tonight, what about the spiritual things? See, how long has it been since we woke up and the first thing we did was open God's Word and read it? You know, how long has it been since I went before God and confessed my sins to Him? You know, one I had to ask myself the question, though, as I prepared for this message tonight, has it really been that long since I was moved at the thought of the lost around me, that they'll spend eternity somewhere? And I'm afraid for many of us, the answer might be, it's been a while. See, life is busy. It certainly was busy for Jesus in Matthew chapter 9. Now, just think about how busy it was. I'm not going to read all of this, but in verse 1, he comes to Capernaum, and these four men carrying the corner of a bed, they bring their friend to a house, and the house is so full of people, they have to let him down into the roof. And Jesus looks at this man and talks to him and tells him about his sin being forgiven, and he heals him. And there's these huge throngs of people watching that, and he's a busy man. In verse 3, he's busy meeting people's needs, but at the same time he's meeting people's needs, he's being criticized for it. They're calling him a blasphemer. So amidst all the ministry and all the busyness, he's trying to answer his critics. In verse 9, he not only is he meeting needs, but he's also reaching people, and he's calling people, and he's building disciples. So he's concerned about discipleship, even though he's busy. In verse 10, he sits down to eat with publicans and sinners. the less desirable faction of society. They come and sit down in the middle of the meal, and he gets more criticism from the Pharisees. In the middle of that, verse 14, then came to him the disciples. These are the disciples of John the Baptist, and they have doubts, and they're trying to figure out, what's true, and why do your disciples do this? I just want you to think about what's happening. It's coming at Jesus really fast. He's got ministry needs, and he's got criticism, and he's reaching people, and even John the Baptist followers, they come asking questions. Verse 18, it says, while he spake these things, while he's talking, another man comes up. And this man says, my daughter is dead. Please come raise her. So in verse 19, he gets up, he arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. And behold, in verse 20, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. I mean, I just want you to imagine, he's healing this man. He's being criticized by these people. He's sitting down to eat with these folks, getting more criticism. John the Baptist's disciples come. They're questioning and asking questions. And then this man comes and says, my daughter is dead. Can you come help her? And he goes to help her. While he's on the way, a woman reaches out and touches the hem of his garment because she needs some help too. And when he finally makes it, I'm doing it this way on purpose. I want you to kind of feel how frantic his life is. See, while he finally makes it to the ruler's house and he hears the mourner's music, and he says in verse 24, oh, she's not dead, she's asleep. And the people start laughing at him. So here's Jesus' life. Ready? Busy meeting the needs of people that come to him. People criticizing while he's trying to meet needs. He's taking time for people while they're calling him names. He's having his meals interrupted. He's being criticized for who he spends time with. He's answering John the Baptist's questions of doubt. He's being mocked for saying this little girl isn't dead. It sets the table for how busy his life is. Verse 27, two blind men come. And they ask him for healing, which he does by touching their eyes. And they go tell everybody, here's what Jesus did, even though he says don't tell anybody. So do you think that's going to amp up the busyness? Yes. Verse 32, a possessed man comes, and he casts the demons out, and the man can speak again. And you would think everybody would be like, praise the Lord, look what Jesus is doing. But the Pharisees they say, you're using Satan's power to cast out demons. One thing after another. And to emphasize the busyness even more, look at verse 35. And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. I just want you to get it tonight. Jesus is moving along. He doesn't get a break from doing this right here, then there's another thing. And this right here, now here's another thing. This right here, here's the criticism. This right here, there's the John the Baptist questions. This right here, he's being called names. Now he's trying to do this and just help people and reach people. And people are coming at him. And I'm trying to preach kind of frantically because I want you to feel it. And if you have anxiety about being too busy, I kind of want you to feel that too right now. All the moms in the room are like, yeah, this is every day. I've got this child meeting her needs, and I've got this child meeting his needs, and one thing after another. Jesus' life was busy. And by the way, he was busy about the Lord's work. He was going in every village, and he was going in the synagogues. He was preaching and teaching and healing and doing everything his Father. By the way, because Jesus is God the Son in the flesh, he did every single thing while he was on earth that his Father wanted him to do. Not one time did he step out of his Father's plan, his Father's will for his life. Everything he did was what he was supposed to do. And you might think, boy, he's going to take some time off now. No, he doesn't really take any time. He just shifts his focus. Because among all the busyness, he's able to stop in verse 36. And it says, but when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. See, to this point, people have been coming to him. And as busy as it's been, he's almost just been forced to minister because there's one thing after another. The friends of the paralyzed man bring him. The ruler comes, his daughter's dead. The woman has an issue of blood. The blind men come in verse 28. They bring to him this dumb man possessed of a devil. But then he looks at the multitude and it moves him. Why? Because there's a whole different group of people here. See, to this point, everyone knows they have a need. And they come to him because they know that their needs are greater than what they can accomplish in their own strength. And they need help. But then he stops and he is moved because he looks out and he sees a whole different group of people. And this group of people, they don't even know they have needs. They don't know that they need somebody to step into their life. And they don't even know that they're weary. They don't even know that they're needy. They're so used to just trudging along in life and just feeling spiritually miserable, and no one's there to help him. And I just want you to understand this. This is the heart of Jesus, and this is the heart of missions. That we are moved at the people that don't even know they need something. There's a whole world of people out there who don't know they need Jesus. They've never been to a church. I mean, I'm shocked. Even in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, it's a churched city. And not a lot of independent Baptists, but plenty of churches. But how many people have never been to a church? And they've never opened the Bible. They've never even had a Bible. And then you go to a place like Nepal or a place like Italy, which is much, I'm sure I know maybe Italy would be more reached by, in some standard, by the Catholicism. But I think about Nepal, maybe how many of those people maybe have never even heard his name, Jesus? Maybe they've seen churches and they might even know who Jesus is, but they don't know who they are. They don't know that they're sinners. They don't know that they have spiritual needs. They don't know that they'll live forever somewhere, either in heaven or in hell. Or maybe they know they're sinners because of their conscience, but they have no hope. They don't know that there's an answer. They don't know that Jesus died on the cross for their sins. And they don't know that all they have to do, by the way, and I don't pretend, and even in a room like this tonight, I don't pretend like everyone knows Jesus Christ, but there are plenty of people that don't know that all they have to do is acknowledge that they're sinners before God and repent of their sin and turn to Jesus Christ by faith alone and cry out to Him to save them. That's all salvation requires. And there are people out there that they don't know that. And my children have been raised in church. They've heard that their whole lives. And yet adults, millions, yea, might I even say billions, who don't know that they have a need. So what do we do about it? What did Jesus do? When he saw them, it says it affected him. He was moved with compassion in verse 36. What he saw affected his heart, Brother Story. It moved him deeply. He took the time to stop among his busyness, by the way. And it moved him so deeply. We get so busy with so many important things to do, but there's a world out there that needs us to see them. Not just faces in a crowd. I mean, each person is a soul. When I was in college, I had a job, and I would have run-ins with people in this job that I had, and they would treat me rudely. I just started developing an attitude. And I would have an attitude toward people in my job because there I'm trying to help them, and they would just treat me rudely. And I started to get to where I just didn't want to talk to anybody, and I had an attitude. Maybe you've never dealt with something like this, but it really started to affect me. And then I heard a message about how every person is a soul. And the message, as a Bible college student, struck me this way, that if I will stop looking at people as a bother and look into their eyes as a soul, it will change the way that I treat them. And I started to do that, and I'm telling you, God changed my heart because I started to recognize this person isn't just an annoyance, and this person isn't just a bother to the rest of my job. This person will live somewhere in eternity. And when I started looking at them and looking in their eyes as souls, it changed the way that I interacted. And I just wonder if maybe some of us need to stop every once in a while, or maybe stop even right now and consider that the people we come across, they're not just nameless faces, they are souls that will spend eternity somewhere. And what it did to Jesus, it gave him compassion. Compassion is to be moved as to one's inwards, to have a great sympathy toward the suffering of another person. In the heart of Christ, that is missions. It's the ability to see strangers. Listen, all of us are moved when we see someone that we love that is distraught. If your child has ever been injured, it's not hard to have compassion unless they disobey. They're like, well, that's what you get. You deserve that. No, when one of my children is hurt, I stop everything I'm doing to help them. But what about strangers? Because that's what Jesus is doing. What did he see that moved him? Well, they fainted. They fainted. It means to be weary and tired in body and soul. Have you stopped to just look at people's faces? There's a lot of weariness in our world. We have a mall in Sioux Falls, and Jace and I, my 13-year-old son, we go to the mall grudgingly. The girls are going from store to store, and Jace and I have a life hack. They have those massage chairs at malls. And if there's not a soft chair available somewhere, we go sit in those, and I might even swipe my card for 5 minutes of bliss. I like to go to the mall not to shop, but sometimes I'll go while the girls are shopping, and I'll just watch. You can learn a lot about people just people watching. But you know what I've noticed? There's a lot of weary people. And when Jesus looked out at this sheep that didn't even know they had need, he looked at them and he saw the weariness in their eyes. And he saw that they were as sheep scattered abroad, having no shepherd, because they were under a religious system of the scribes and Pharisees. The religious leaders had taught them that it's all about rules, and they had no relationship with Jesus. And they were chasing and not finding anything that could satisfy them because they didn't know Jesus Christ. And so they were chasing religion, and they had all the rules, but they didn't have a relationship. And that's exactly what's happening in our culture. It's exactly what's happening in our world. People are chasing money, and they're chasing fame, and they're chasing popularity. And when they catch it, it doesn't do anything to satisfy. And they're weary in their souls, and you can see it on their faces if we would take the time to look. And that's exactly what Jesus was seeing right here, that scattered sheep are aimless, and they're defenseless, and they're unproductive, and he was moved. But listen, there was something his compassion moved him to do. See, his compassion moved him to action. At verse 37, it says, "Then saith he unto his disciples, The harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest." And it says in verse 1, "And when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease." And then it gives us the names of them. And then verse 5, "These 12 Jesus sent forth." Understand this. We're very good at times at being moved by our emotions. But when you're moved by compassion, it doesn't just call your emotions, it calls you to action. And he calls it harvest season. He says there are more plants to pick than there are workers. And we're from corn country. Where Iowa's 2.5 miles from our church as the crow flies. And getting late summer, that corn gets real high and it puts off so much humidity. The corn does. It raises the humidity of the whole area up there. I mean, it's corn everywhere. And when those combines get going and the dust is picking up, I mean, there's no holding back. It is full court press because there's so many acres to farm and there's so much work to do. And they know that the days are going to be long from the morning till the night because there's so much to do. We can't take any time off. And that's what Jesus says. He stops. Listen, he stops to look. And in stopping to look, he's moved with compassion when he sees their faces. But his compassion is not just emotion. His compassion is a call to action. And he calls his disciples and he sends them forth. And he says, go, because the harvest is plenteous and there are more plants to pick than we have workers for. And you need to go and get busy. And he sends his disciples forth and they go and start doing the work because he knows that there's a very little time and the harvest is plenteous. And I just want you to understand, we're going to get here to the application. But Jesus first stops being so busy and looks at people, which we need to do. But when he looks at people, he sees who they really are. They're weary. And in seeing that they're so weary, it moves him to prayer and action. And here's the question tonight. If it's our goal to be like Jesus in every way, how long has it been since you were moved like Jesus for the lost around you? Can you remember the last time you were burdened over someone lost? When's the last time you faced your fear and you invited someone, you gave them a tract and invited them to church anyway? Because being moved like Jesus means we take action. When's the last time you were moved at the sight of someone who looked weary, hopeless? You know, we can say all day that we want to be like Jesus Christ. But if we're never deeply, inwardly, seriously moved at the sight of the lost, can we truly claim to be like Jesus? How long has it been since you gave to missions with a burden? You know, I don't mean how long since you gave. Because I think probably all of us at some point we've given recently. I gave last Sunday at our church. I'll give the next time I'm in our church services. Most of us gave recently. Most of us will do it again soon. I don't mean how long since you gave. I mean how long since you gave because you were moved. I don't mean how long. I mean, how long has it been since you prayed for someone to get saved? We often do, but not just how long has it been since you prayed, how long since you were moved to pray? You know, I mean how long since you were moved to give? How long since you were moved to pray? Moved to tell someone about Jesus? Moved to the point of inward, deep, emotional sympathy. Not on autopilot. Moved. How long? A month? This is a searching question. How long? 6 months? How long? Since Missions Conference 2025? How long? 3 years ago when you watched that one missionary video that was really good? How long? 5 years ago when you witnessed to that one person? No, I want you to think tonight. Because you'll probably end up asking the question I asked at the beginning. Has it really been that long? Has it really been that long since I was moved to enough to stop being so busy and look at people's faces? Has it really been that long since I cared enough to hand out the tract, not just to leave one at the table, but to look someone in the face and invite? Has it really been that long? I mean, since I as a Christian shed a tear for someone I know is not a believer? Has it been that long since I was moved to give, or moved to tell, or moved to pray, or moved to shed a tear, or moved to come to missions conference every night? Not out of guilt, not out of force, not because the pastor's going to give me a hard time, but because in my heart I was moved at the thought that there are lost folks in Springfield and beyond that are dependent on me not just going through the motions and not just being on autopilot, but they're depending on me being moved to pray, moved to give, and moved to tell, and moved to go. Has it been that long? When I asked myself that question, I was moved with conviction. Because I give and I tell and I invite and I go and I do what I'm supposed to do. But sometimes it's not as busy as Jesus Christ. But sometimes I feel like this problem comes at me, and this problem comes at me, and this problem, and then this one, and this one. I've got to figure this out. I've got to do that. And I can go days or weeks or months without stopping and looking and being moved. And if we're going to be like Jesus, then amidst all the busyness, we have to stop long enough to see and be moved. Because missions is not about giving, it's about being moved to give. And it's not about telling, it's about being moved to tell. And it's not about just going, it's about being moved to go. And it's not just about praying, it's about being moved to pray. Because if you read the New Testament, over and over and over, Jesus challenged the Pharisees and he challenged the religious leaders for being hypocritical and that they were doing what they were supposed to do, but not for the right reasons. And God help us as members of a good independent Baptist church, heavily involved in missions, to not get so busy with one thing after the next and one thing after the next that we go months or years without being moved to do it. When I was in college, if you're young, don't listen. I heard a message in Bible college. And by the way, in Bible college, I love Bible college students because they have so much zeal. I mean, you get up and preach a message and they're just going to go do it. I was that way, 19 years old. Somebody preached a message about going to find somebody and just tell them about Jesus. And so I was in my dorm and I was just stirred up. I don't know if you ever just get stirred up about something. It's not football or Buc-ee's. Not preaching against Buc-ee's, by the way. You ever get stirred up about something in a message? I did. I got stirred up. And I was in my room and I didn't have to work that night. And this was in Southern California. And I just wanted to go do something for the Lord. So I got in my car and I started driving. And I drove from the campus where I was going to Bible college. And I ended up in Los Angeles on Hollywood Boulevard. Like I said, if you're young, don't listen. Because I would never, if my son wanted to do this, I'd say, no way, absolutely not. If a young person would say this, to go down there by yourself, Hollywood Boulevard, it's unlike any place you've probably been. There's not many places like that anywhere else. It's crazy. But I was like, where are the people? And I was being moved. And I went to that sidewalk and I started just handing out tracts and I just started to talk to people. I was by myself just telling people as they went by, and most people wanted nothing to do with it. But these two college-age girls, they came by and they stopped and I started talking to them and I started witnessing to them, and one of them I could tell was not interested. But the other one, I could see it in her eyes. She was being moved. And so I went through the gospel and gave her the gospel. And right there on Hollywood Boulevard, I got to lead this young lady to the Lord. Now, was it smart? No. Was it dumb? Yes. Would I tell anybody else to do it? No. But understand, at least I was being moved. At least God was working in me and drawing me to do something and go get out there and stop sitting in the dorm and messing around. But I was moved, and I wouldn't advise it. But listen, sometimes I wonder if maybe we ought to just get back to the place where we're moved to do something for Christ. And not to have somebody say, well, I wouldn't do it that way or I wouldn't do that. No, at least we're being moved. At least we have a heart to see something done for Jesus Christ. Maybe we just need to get back to that. I'm not saying being unwise. I'm saying stopping the busy life just long enough to look in someone's face and say, if I don't tell them, nobody probably will. I don't want to be involved in missions because the pastor expects it. And I don't want to be involved in missions because it's what we do at Berean and we've got this budget we've got to keep up. No, I want to do it because I'm moved. And I want you to do it because you're moved. Because like Jesus, you stop long enough in the busyness to look at faces and recognize if I don't tell them, nobody will. And somebody's got to be moved to do something for God. And if it's me, I'm okay with that. You know, at those warehouses and workplaces, they have those signs. And it says, you know, like 300 days since the last accident. You know, and then somebody gets hurt. And you got to wipe it off 0 days. The guy in the sling's like, sorry guys, you know, all my fault. You know, it's a negative thing. But I wonder if maybe we ought to think of it as a positive thing when it comes to missions. Because some of us have a sign and it says 365 days since I was moved. Or it says 700 days since I was moved. Have I given a lot in between that? Yeah. Have I told people? Yeah. Have I done things for God? Yeah. But 700 days since I was moved. Some of us in here, it might be in the thousands. And God help us. Because Missions Conference 2026, this is one of those where it might be good to wipe that off and say 0 days since I was moved. Because God moved in me tonight. 0 days since I stopped to pray for somebody who needs Jesus and I was moved by it. 0 days since I handed a tract out because I was moved to tell somebody. 0 days since I told God, wherever you want to send me, I will go because I was moved. I don't know what number is on your sign, but it could be tonight that we need to ask God to wipe it and put a big 0 back up on it. And say, no, 0 days since I was moved to do something for God. You know, Jesus Christ stopped among the busyness. And he looked at faces. And he was moved to pray and act. And I just wonder if we want to be like Jesus, tonight might be the night that we ask him to help us stop in our busyness and to think about faces and to pray and act. You know, one author said, Mark Cahill wrote in One Thing You Can't Do in Heaven, he said this, 300 million years from now, what will be the only thing that will matter? Will it matter how much money you made? Will it matter what kind of car you drove? Will it matter who won the NCAA football and basketball titles this year? 300 million years from now, the only thing that will matter is who is in heaven and who is in hell. And if that is the only thing that will matter then that should be one of our greatest concerns now. Has it really been that long since I was moved like Jesus? Unfortunately, for some, probably. But here's the great thing. On our face before the Lord tonight, he'll reset the number. And he'll reset it to 0. If you'll just give God permission to move afresh in your heart today. Let's have every head bowed, every eye closed. Just want to ask you, how long has it been since you were moved? Has it been that long? I'm afraid for some of us we might have to say, It's been far too long since I moved. I mean, it hasn't been that long since I gave. It hasn't been long since I told. It hasn't been long since I went. It hasn't been long since I gave to missions. But that's not the question. The question tonight is, how long has it been since you were moved to do those things? I just want to ask you tonight, if the Lord has worked in your heart, would you consider doing him the courtesy of a response? If he has moved in you, would you say, God, move in me. Help me to be moved toward missions. Not on autopilot, not because it's expected, but because you are working in my heart about it. And here's the great thing. Jesus Christ was moved enough to come for us. And we ought to be moved enough to go for him. Is God moving in your heart to change the way you've been involved in missions, to be moved to do it because he's working, not because it's just what you do? Let's stand together. I'm going to pray, and as the invitation begins, let's give ourselves plenty of time tonight to let the Lord do a work in our hearts.